My son-in-law has been poisoning my coffee for 6 weeks. My name is Gerald Davis, and I'm 67 years old. For 2 years since my wife Martha passed, I thought I was losing my mind. The stomach cramps every Tuesday after our coffee meetings, the dizzy spells, the way my hands shook whenever Brad would suggest, maybe it's time to consider assisted living. I trusted him because he was family. That trust nearly killed me. When Miguel, the restaurant's security guard, whispered those words to me, "Mr. Davis, I saw your son-in-law pour something into your coffee." Everything clicked into place. The mysterious illnesses, the convenient timing, Brad's sudden interest in my $1.8 million house. But here's what Brad didn't know about me. When Miguel told me what he'd seen, I didn't explode. I didn't confront Brad. Instead, I did what I'd done for 23 years as a high school principal. I gathered evidence and planned a lesson that would last a lifetime. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. This is the story of how a grieving widower became a student's worst nightmare. Let me paint you a picture of what Brad saw when he looked at me. A broken old man clinging to routines. Every Tuesday at 3 p.m., I'd meet him at Corner Cafe on Maple Street. Same booth, same order, black coffee and a blueberry muffin. I'd shake slightly when I reached for the sugar packets. Sometimes I'd forget what day it was. "Jerry's really going downhill," I'd overhear Brad telling my daughter Emma. "Did you see how he spilled coffee on his shirt yesterday?" And he asked me the same question 3 times. The first sign I was being underestimated came during Thanksgiving dinner. Brad was showing off his latest real estate deal, a $3.2 million Victorian he'd flipped in just 4 months. "The secret," he announced to the table, "is recognizing when property owners become liabilities. Sometimes they're too attached to let go of what's best for everyone." His eyes found mine across the table. "Right, Jerry? Sometimes we need help making tough decisions." Emma squeezed my hand. "Dad's doing fine in his house, Brad." "For now," Brad smiled. "But winter's coming. Those Victorian stairs get slippery. What if he falls and no one finds him for days?" I said nothing, just nodded and sipped my coffee. But I noticed how Brad's smile never reached his eyes. The second sign came 2 weeks later during our regular Tuesday meeting. I'd mentioned that my hands had been shakier lately, and Brad leaned forward with false concern. "Jerry, I've been researching assisted living facilities. Sunrise Senior Living has an opening. Beautiful place, really. Full-time medical staff, activities, meals included." "How much?" I asked, though I already knew. $8,500 a month. I know it sounds steep, but think about the peace of mind. Emma wouldn't have to worry about you anymore. I did the math slowly, deliberately appearing confused. That's more than my pension." "Exactly why we should discuss selling the house. I could handle everything, listing, staging, negotiations. You wouldn't have to lift a finger. Properties like yours are hot right now. We could probably get $1.8 million, maybe more." There it was, the real conversation. "What would I do with that much money in a nursing home?" I asked. Brad's mask slipped for just a second. "Well, there are ways to protect assets. Transfer them to family members for safekeeping. I could set up a trust. Handle the investments." I stared at him, letting the silence stretch. Brad interpreted my quiet as confusion, maybe even agreement. He reached across the table and patted my hand like I was a child. "Don't worry about the details, Jerry. That's what family is for." That's when I knew for certain. Brad wasn't trying to help me. He was positioning himself to inherit everything while I was still alive. But what really opened my eyes was what happened next. As we stood to leave, I stumbled slightly, genuinely dizzy from whatever he'd put in my coffee. Brad caught my arm, and for a moment I saw something cold flash across his face. Not concern, satisfaction. He wanted me weak. He needed me to appear incompetent. "Easy there, Jerry," he said loudly enough for other diners to hear. "Maybe we should call Emma. You seem a bit off today." An elderly woman at the next table looked over with sympathy. "Is your father all right, dear?" "We're managing," Brad replied with a long-suffering sigh. "Some days are better than others." I said nothing on the drive home, but that night I sat in Martha's chair and really thought about what I was up against. Brad saw a frail, grieving widower with valuable assets and no defenses. He was betting that grief had made me stupid. He was about to learn the difference between grief and stupidity the hard way. Let me tell you what I stood to lose if I stayed silent. First, the obvious, my home. Martha and I bought our Victorian house on Elm Street in 1983 for $89,000. Today, it's worth $1.8 million. But it's not about the money. It's about 41 years of memories soaked into those walls. The kitchen where Martha taught Emma to make her grandmother's apple pie. The living room where we hosted graduation parties for dozens of my students. The bedroom where Martha and I spent our last night together, before the cancer took her. Brad wanted to gut it, flip it, and turn our love story into his profit margin. Second, my independence. Sunrise Senior Living wasn't just expensive, it was a cage. I'd visited enough of my former colleagues there to know the truth. They warehouse you, feed you bland food at scheduled times, organize activities like you're a child, strip away everything that makes you, you. But the real stakes hit me when I thought about Martha's legacy. See, Martha wasn't just my wife. She was the heart of our community. For 35 years, she ran the food bank at St. Matthew's Church. Every Christmas, she organized toy drives that helped 200 families. When the high school needed funding for new computers, Martha single-handedly raised $40,000 through bake sales and garage sales. Before she died, Martha made me promise something. "Jerry," she whispered from her hospital bed, "don't let them turn our story into nothing." Our will specified that after my death, the house would go to Emma, but $500,000 would go to the Martha Davis Memorial Fund for community programs. If Brad got control of my assets through some bogus trust arrangement, that money would disappear into his real estate schemes. Martha's legacy would die with me, but there was something even worse at stake. My students. You have to understand, teaching isn't just a job, it's a calling. Over 23 years as a principal, I'd shaped thousands of young lives. Kids who came from broken homes found stability in my office. Troublemakers learned that discipline could be kind but firm. Future leaders discovered their potential under my guidance. Many of those students were now adults with important positions in our community. They still called me Principal Davis when they saw me at the grocery store. They credited me with changing their lives. If Brad succeeded in painting me as a senile old man who couldn't manage his own affairs, what would that do to my reputation? How could I face former students knowing they pitied me? How could I maintain their respect if I let some greedy son-in-law rob me blind? The worst part was Emma. My daughter loved Brad, or at least she loved the version of him she thought she knew. She had no idea her husband was slowly poisoning her father to steal his inheritance. If I confronted Brad without proof, Emma would side with him. I'd look like a paranoid old man making wild accusations against her husband. Our relationship would be destroyed. But if I said nothing, if I let Brad's plan succeed, Emma would watch her father deteriorate and eventually die, never knowing her husband was responsible. She'd grieve my decline, blame herself for not doing more, and carry that guilt forever. Either way, I'd lose my daughter. That's when I realized the true scope of what Brad was attempting. This wasn't just theft. It was the systematic destruction of everything I'd built. My home, my independence, my legacy, my relationship with Emma, even my reputation among the students who looked up to me. Brad was trying to erase Gerald Davis from existence and pocket the proceeds. But here's what he didn't know. I'd spent 4 decades teaching teenagers. I'd seen every manipulation tactic, every lie, every scheme a young mind could devise. Brad thought he was playing chess with a confused old man. He was about to discover he'd picked a fight with a grandmaster. The confrontation began 3 days after Miguel's warning, during our usual Tuesday meeting. I arrived at Corner Cafe 5 minutes early and positioned myself where I could watch Brad's approach. When he walked in, I studied his face, his body language, the way he carried that small leather portfolio he always brought to our meetings. "Hey, Jerry," he said, sliding into the booth across from me. How are you feeling? The question had new meaning now. He was asking if his poison was working. Some good days, some bad days, I replied carefully. Brad nodded with fake sympathy. That's normal at your age. Coffee? Please. He signaled the waitress, then opened his portfolio. I've been thinking about our conversation last week, about the house. What about it? I talked to a colleague who specializes in senior transitions. She says the key is acting before a crisis hits. Brad pulled out a thick folder. I took the liberty of getting some preliminary paperwork together. Power of attorney forms, trust documents, a pre-listing agreement for the house. He spread the papers across the table like a dealer showing his cards. This way, if something happens, a fall, a medical emergency, cognitive decline, Em and I can step in immediately. No delays, no bureaucracy. I stared at the documents. You want me to sign away my house today? Not sign it away. Protect it. Transfer it to a family trust where it's safe. Safe from what? Brad's patience cracked slightly. From taxes, Jerry. From nursing home costs that could eat up everything you've worked for. From... He paused, choosing his words. From decisions you might make when you're not thinking clearly. There it was. The first direct insult. Are you saying I'm not thinking clearly? I'm saying you're 67 years old and living alone in a huge house. Last week you forgot Emma's birthday until she called to thank you for flowers you didn't remember sending. That was a lie. I'd sent Emma flowers exactly as planned, but I said nothing. Brad, I appreciate your concern, but... Do you? His voice sharpened. Because from where I sit, it looks like stubborn pride. Martha's gone, Jerry. She's not coming back. Clinging to that house won't bring her back. The words hit like a physical blow. I felt my hands tremble. Not from poison this time, but from rage. Don't talk about my wife. Someone has to. Martha would want you to be practical. She'd want you safe and cared for, not rattling around that old house having dizzy spells and falling downstairs. I haven't fallen down any stairs. Yet? Brad leaned forward. Look at yourself, Jerry. Really look. When's the last time you showered? Your shirt has coffee stains. You asked me the same question twice when I walked in. Another lie. I was showered and dressed carefully, and I'd asked him exactly one question. I'm fine, Brad. You're not fine. You're declining, and everyone can see it, except you. His voice took on a tone I'd heard him use with difficult clients, condescending, dismissive. Emma's worried sick. She calls me crying after every visit, asking what we should do about her father who's losing his mind. And that's not true, isn't it? When's the last time you balanced your checkbook? Paid bills on time? Hell, when's the last time you cooked a real meal instead of eating cereal for dinner? Each question was designed to make me doubt myself. I recognized the technique. Gaslighting, my psychology training called it. Make the victim question their own reality. I managed just fine. Brad laughed. Actually laughed. You think you do. But managing and actually doing are different things. I've seen your mailbox, Jerry. Bills piling up. Late notices. That was impossible. I paid every bill electronically, on time, every month. But Brad was counting on me not remembering clearly. Maybe we should call Emma, I said quietly. Why? So you can worry her more? So she can see her father falling apart in real time? Brad's mask was completely off now. Face facts, old man. You're becoming a burden. The house is wasted on you. That money could actually do some good in responsible hands. The cafe had gone quiet around us. Other diners were staring. Responsible hands like yours? I asked. Damn right like mine. I built a business from nothing. I know how to manage assets, how to make money work. You know what you know? How to give gold stars to teenagers. He gathered up the papers with sharp, angry movements. But hey, if you want to be selfish, if you want to hold on to everything until you're drooling in a state-run facility, that's your choice. Just remember, when you fall down those stairs, when you have a stroke alone in that big empty house, don't come crying to Emma about how you should have listened to family. Brad stood up, threw a $10 bill on the table, and walked out. I sat there for a long moment, my hands steady now, my mind crystal clear. Then I pulled out my phone and started making calls. Part 5. Foreshadowing. $800, 800 words. That night, I went down to my basement office for the first time since Martha's funeral. The room was exactly as I'd left it 2 years ago. Filing cabinets lined one wall, filled with lesson plans from 1985 to 2008. My old desk sat in the corner, still cluttered with the same papers, the same coffee-stained gradebooks, the same framed photo of Martha and me at the 2005 Teacher of the Year ceremony. But what I was looking for was in the closet. I pulled out 3 cardboard boxes, each one carefully labeled in Martha's handwriting. Jerry's students, thank you letters, professional contacts, and awards and recognition. The first box contained 847 letters from former students. I'd saved every single one. Dear Principal Davis, I know you probably won't remember me, but I was in your office almost every day, freshman year, for fighting. You never gave up on me. I wanted you to know I just graduated law school. That one was from Patricia Williams, class of '89. Mr. Davis, you changed my life when you convinced me to take AP Chemistry instead of shop class. I'm finishing my residency at Johns Hopkins now. Samuel Johnson, class of '94. I was the kid whose mom died junior year, and you drove me to the funeral home when my dad was too drunk to take me. Yesterday I was sworn in as detective with Metro PD. Lisa Brown, class of '96. Story after story. Lives I'd touched. Futures I'd helped shape. The second box held business cards, Christmas cards, and contact information for hundreds of former students. As I flipped through them, a pattern emerged. These weren't just random kids who'd moved away and forgotten about high school. They were judges, lawyers, doctors, police officers, business owners, city council members, even Mayor Rebecca Davis, no relation, but she'd been Rebecca Martinez in my AP Government class of '87. The third box made me smile for the first time in days. Awards I'd forgotten about. Principal of the Year from the State Education Association, 1992. Community Leadership Award from the Chamber of Commerce, 1998. Lifetime Achievement in Education from the Governor's Office, 2007. But it was the newspaper clippings Martha had saved that really opened my eyes. Local Principal's Tough Love Approach Transforms Troubled Teens. Gerald Davis, the man who saved Lincoln High. How one educator built a legacy that lasts generations. I'd never paid much attention to the articles when they were written. But reading them now, I saw something I'd missed. The reporters hadn't just written about my teaching methods. They'd documented the network of relationships I'd built over 4 decades. My phone rang. The caller ID said Judge Williams. Patricia? Principal Davis, I heard through the grapevine that you might need some advice. Legal advice. I hadn't called Patricia. I hadn't called anyone yet. How did you hear that? Dr. Johnson called me. He runs toxicology at the county lab now. Did you know that? Anyway, he said Miguel Santos contacted him about some concerns regarding your health. Miguel, the security guard. How did he know Dr. Johnson? Miguel's my cousin, Patricia continued, reading my mind. He's been worried about you since his wife Rosa started working at Corner Cafe. She's the waitress who serves you and your son-in-law every Tuesday. The pieces clicked together. Miguel hadn't just randomly noticed Brad poisoning my coffee. He'd been watching because Rosa had told him about the strange pattern, how I always got sick after our meetings, how Brad always insisted on handling the coffee orders, how I seemed fine when I came in, but shaky when I left. Principal Davis, are you there? Yes, Patricia, I'm here. Good. Here's what we're going to do. Sam Johnson is going to arrange for some discreet blood work, off the books, just between friends. If there's evidence of poisoning, I'll make sure it gets to the right people. Lisa Brown is a detective now, specializes in elder abuse cases. Lisa Brown? From my advanced placement government class? Patricia laughed. The same Lisa Brown you convinced to apply for the police academy instead of dropping out senior year. She owes you her career, and she knows it. I was quiet for a moment, processing what was happening. My former students weren't just successful, they were powerful, and they were organizing to protect me. Patricia, I don't want to involve anyone in... Stop right there. You think we forgot what you did for us? You think we don't know you're the reason half this town's leadership exists? When someone threatens Principal Davis, they threaten all of us. After I hung up, I sat in my basement office surrounded by boxes of memories. and felt something I hadn't felt since Martha died. I felt like myself again. Brad had made a critical error in judgment. He'd assumed a retired educator would be isolated, powerless, easy to manipulate. What he'd failed to consider was that teachers don't retire alone. They retire with an army. The public humiliation came at Emma's birthday dinner, exactly 1 week after my confrontation with Brad. Emma had reserved the private dining room at Riverside Grill for 20 guests, family, close friends, and some of Brad's real estate colleagues. I arrived wearing my best suit, the navy blue one Martha had picked out for my retirement ceremony. "Dad!" Emma hugged me tight. "You look wonderful. Are you feeling better?" "Much better," I said truthfully. Dr. Johnson's discreet blood tests had confirmed elevated levels of ipecac, enough to cause nausea and disorientation, but not enough to be immediately life-threatening. Clever. Brad wanted me sick, not dead. At least not yet. The dinner started normally. Emma opened gifts, made a speech about turning 29 and feeling grateful for family. I presented her with Martha's pearl necklace, something we'd planned for this exact birthday years ago. "Oh, Dad," Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Mom would have loved this moment." That's when Brad decided to make his move. "Actually," he said, standing up with his wine glass, "this seems like the perfect time to share some family news." The room quieted. Emma looked confused. "What news?" Brad smiled his realtor smile. "Well, honey, your father and I have been having some serious conversations about his future, about making sure he's safe and cared for as he adjusts to getting older." I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, but this time it wasn't from poison. It was from pure fury. "Brad," I said quietly, "this isn't the time." "When is the time, Jerry?" His voice carried across the room. "When you fall down the stairs. When you forget to turn off the stove and burn the house down." Emma set down her fork. "Brad, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about reality, honey. Your father is declining. Rapidly. He's having memory issues, balance problems, confusion. Last week he couldn't remember our conversation from 5 minutes earlier." The table had gone silent. 20 pairs of eyes watching this family drama unfold. "That's not true," I said firmly. Brad pulled out his phone. "I've been documenting incidents, Emma, for your protection and his. Look at this." He showed Emma something on his screen. Photos, I realized. Photos of me looking confused or unsteady, taken without my knowledge during our Tuesday meetings. Here he is last Tuesday, completely disoriented after spilling coffee on himself. And here's the week before, when he tried to pay for a $5 coffee with a 20 and couldn't understand the change. More lies. Carefully constructed lies with photographic evidence taken out of context. "Dad?" Emma's voice was small, worried. "Is this true? Are you having problems?" Before I could answer, Brad continued his performance. "Emma, I love your father. We all do, but love means making hard decisions. I found an excellent assisted living facility, Sunrise Senior Living. It's only 15 minutes from our house, so you can visit whenever you want." "Brad, stop," I said, standing up. "You're embarrassing Emma on her birthday. I'm trying to save her from a crisis, Jerry. What happens when you have a medical emergency and no one finds you for days? What happens when your memory gets so bad you can't recognize her anymore?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking, using Emma's love for me as a weapon against both of us. "The house needs to be sold," Brad announced to the room. "The proceeds will go into a trust to pay for his care. I've prepared all the paperwork. We just need Jerry to sign." He pulled out the same documents from our cafe meeting, spreading them across the birthday table like a hostile takeover. I won't sign anything," I said. Brad's mask slipped completely. "Then you're being selfish. You're putting your own stubbornness ahead of your daughter's peace of mind." "Brad, please." Emma tried to intervene, but he was on a roll now. "Look at him, Emma. Really look. He's shaking. He can barely hold his coffee cup steady. This morning he called me Tom instead of Brad. 3 times. Another lie. I'd never called him Tom. Last month he got lost driving to the grocery store and couldn't remember how to get home. The police found him parked on Elm Street, crying. That was the most vicious lie yet. Not just false, but designed to paint me as pathetic and helpless. That never happened, I said, but my voice was shaking now, not from medication, but from ID at watching Brad destroy my reputation in front of people who mattered to Emma. Dad, Emma reached for my hand. If you're having problems, we can work through this together. We don't have to make any big decisions tonight. There's more, Brad said ruthlessly. Tell her about the pills, Jerry. Tell her about the prescriptions you can't keep track of anymore. The room was staring at me with pity now. I saw it in their faces, the sad certainty that they were watching an old man's dignity crumble in real time. I don't know what pills you're talking about, I said. Brad reached into his jacket and pulled out a pill bottle. These pills, the ones I found rolling around loose in your coffee cup last Tuesday. He showed the bottle to Emma. Warfarin. Blood thinners. He's taken them randomly, Emma. Sometimes twice a day, sometimes not at all. One mistake with blood thinners, and he could have a stroke or bleed out internally. The performance was masterful. Brad had turned Emma's birthday dinner into a medical intervention, complete with props and witnesses. Brad, Emma was crying now, why didn't you tell me this was so serious? Because I hoped we could handle it privately, but your father won't listen to reason. I felt the room's sympathy shift completely to Brad. Here was a caring son-in-law trying to help a stubborn old man who refused to face reality. Brad moved in for the kill. I think we should call an ambulance. Have him evaluated tonight. That's when I smiled. Actually, Brad, I said calmly, I think that's an excellent idea. The ambulance arrived exactly 14 minutes later. What Brad didn't know was that I'd asked Dr. Johnson to position EMT units near Riverside Grill just in case. What he also didn't know was that the lead paramedic, Janet Rodriguez, had been in my advanced biology class of 01. Principal Davis, Janet said as she entered the dining room, I understand you're having some medical concerns tonight. Actually, Janet, I think the concerns are about my son-in-law's behavior. Brad's confident expression faltered slightly. Wait, you two know each other? Janet was one of my brightest students, I explained calmly. Straight A's in advanced placement biology. I wrote her recommendation letter for paramedic training. Janet smiled. Best teacher I ever had. Sir, can you tell me what's been happening? For the past 6 weeks, my son-in-law has been putting ipecac in my coffee during our Tuesday meetings. Dr. Samuel Johnson at County General ran discrete blood work that confirmed elevated levels consistent with systematic poisoning. The room went dead silent. Brad laughed nervously. That's exactly what I'm talking about. These paranoid delusions, these wild accusations. Mr. Mitchell, Janet interrupted, Dr. Johnson briefed me on the lab results before I came here. The levels are significant, and the timeline matches Mr. Davis's reported symptoms. This is insane, Brad said, but his voice had lost its authority. You're all taking the word of a confused old man over a man who spent 23 years as principal of Lincoln High School? The new voice came from the doorway. Judge Patricia Williams had arrived, still wearing her courtroom robes. Emma gasped. Judge Williams? What are you doing here? Emma, honey, I've known your father since I was 15 years old. He kept me out of juvenile detention and helped me get into law school. Patricia's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. When someone systematically poisons Gerald Davis, they answer to me. Brad's face had gone pale. This is some kind of conspiracy. You're all working together. We absolutely are, said another voice from the doorway. Detective Lisa Brown stepped into the room, badge visible on her belt. Mr. Mitchell, I'm Detective Brown, Metro PD Elder Abuse Unit. I have a warrant to search your vehicle and residence for controlled substances. The dinner guests were staring in shock as my former students took control of the situation. Brad looked around the room desperately. Emma, you can't believe this. They're ganging up on your father, feeding into his delusions. Actually, Emma said quietly, I'm starting to understand something. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her photos. Brad, remember when you showed me those pictures of Dad looking confused? I just realized something about the timestamps. Emma held up her phone. Every single photo was taken on a Tuesday afternoon, always after your coffee meetings, never any other time. Brad's mouth opened and closed like a fish. And another thing, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger. I never called you crying about Dad's condition. I never said he was losing his mind. You made that up." Judge Williams pulled out a folded document. "Mr. Mitchell, this is a temporary restraining order preventing you from contact with Gerald Davis. It's also a court order freezing any financial accounts or property transfers involving Mr. Davis's assets." "On what grounds?" "Elder abuse, financial exploitation, attempted fraud." Patricia's voice was ice cold. "Would you like me to continue?" Dr. Johnson appeared in the doorway carrying a medical bag. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was brutal." He looked at Brad. "Mr. Mitchell, I presume? I'm Dr. Samuel Johnson, county toxicologist. I believe we need to discuss your recent purchases of ipecac syrup." Brad staggered backward. "How could you possibly know?" "Because I asked the right questions at the right pharmacies," Lisa Brown said. Amazing what people remember when a police detective starts asking about unusual purchases. 3 different locations, 3 different names, but the same credit card. "You used your credit card to buy poison," Emma said, staring at her husband in horror. "You bought poison and you put it in my father's coffee." "Emma, I can explain." "Explain what? Explain how you've been slowly killing my father while convincing me he was losing his mind?" The room erupted as the full scope of Brad's plan became clear to everyone present. Emma's friends were gasping, Brad's real estate colleagues were backing away from him, and my former students were documenting everything for their respective professional purposes. "The beautiful part," I said calmly, addressing the room, "is that Brad documented everything himself." I pulled out my phone and showed the screen to Emma. "I've been recording our Tuesday conversations for the past 3 weeks. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to gaslight me into signing away my house." "You recorded me without consent," Brad shouted. Judge Williams smiled. "Virginia is a one-party consent state, Mr. Mitchell. Mr. Davis had every right to record conversations he was part of." "Here's my favorite part," I continued, scrolling through the recordings. Brad explaining how he could handle my assets through a trust, and how he could protect them from decisions I might make when I'm not thinking clearly. The recording played clearly in the silent room. That money could actually do some good in responsible hands. Damn right like mine, I built a business from nothing. Emma was crying now, but not from grief, from fury. "You wanted my father to die," she whispered. "You were positioning yourself to inherit everything while he was still alive." "No, Emma. I wanted him safe. You called him a burden. You said our house was wasted on him." Brad looked around the room desperately, searching for an ally, an escape route, anything, but he was surrounded by the network he'd never known existed. "The real irony," I said, standing up slowly, "is that you might have succeeded if you'd understood who you were dealing with." I gestured to my former students. "Judge Williams sentences people like you. Dr. Johnson analyzes evidence against people like you. Detective Brown arrests people like you. Janet here saves people from people like you." Brad's legs seemed to give out. He sank into his chair. 4 decades of teaching, Brad. 4 decades of building relationships based on respect, trust, and genuine care for other people's futures. You thought that made me weak. I smiled, and for the first time in months, it felt completely natural. You thought wrong. Detective Brown stepped forward with handcuffs. "Bradford Mitchell, you're under arrest for elder abuse, assault with a dangerous substance, and conspiracy to commit fraud." As she read him his rights, Brad kept staring at me with complete bewilderment, as if he couldn't understand how the weak old man had become the center of a coordinated takedown by half the city's power structure. "The lesson here, Brad," I said as they led him away, "is simple. Teachers don't just educate students. They build communities, and communities protect their own." Emma hugged me tightly as the room broke into applause. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have known." "You couldn't have known, sweetheart, but now you do." And as I looked around the room at my former students, now grown into judges and doctors and police officers, I felt something I hadn't felt since Martha died. I felt like the luckiest man alive. 3 weeks later, we held Martha's second memorial service. It was supposed to be a quiet remembrance, just family and close friends gathering at Riverside Community Center to share memories and celebrate her life. Emma had planned it months earlier, before Brad's arrest, as a way to mark the second anniversary of Martha's death with something positive instead of just grief. What Emma didn't know was that I'd invited a few additional guests. The community center held exactly 200 people, and every seat was filled. Emma stared in amazement as people kept arriving. Former students, teaching colleagues, parents of kids I'd helped over the years, community leaders Martha had worked with at the food bank. "Dad, how many people did you invite?" "Just a few," I said innocently. The service began with Emma sharing stories about her mother's community work. She talked about the food bank, the toy drives, the way Martha could organize 50 volunteers with 3 phone calls and a handwritten list. Then Judge Williams stood up. "I'd like to say something about Martha Davis and about the man who loved her." She walked to the front of the room, her judicial robes replaced by a simple black dress, but her authority unchanged. 2 months ago, someone tried to destroy Gerald Davis. They tried to steal his home, his independence, his dignity, and his legacy. They tried to convince his own daughter that he was losing his mind. The room was perfectly quiet. That person made a critical error. They assumed that a retired educator would be powerless. They forgot that teachers don't just teach subjects. They shape lives. They don't just grade papers. They build futures. And they don't retire alone. They retire with an army of grateful students who became the community's leaders. Patricia gestured to the audience. "Look around this room. We have 12 judges, including 2 from the state Supreme Court. We have 15 doctors, 3 of whom run major hospital departments. We have 8 police officers, including our police chief. We have the mayor, 4 city council members, and half the county school board." Emma was staring at me with growing amazement. Every person in this room owes something to Gerald Davis. A second chance, a college recommendation, a life lesson that changed their trajectory. And when someone threatened him, we didn't hesitate to act. Patricia pulled out a thick folder, but that's not the end of the story. Because while we were protecting Gerald, he was teaching us one final lesson about justice. She opened the folder and held up photographs. "These are surveillance images from Corner Cafe, taken over 6 weeks of Tuesday meetings. They show Bradford Mitchell systematically poisoning Gerald's coffee with ipecac syrup." Gasps echoed through the room. Even knowing the story, seeing the photographic evidence was shocking. "Here's the toxicology report confirming elevated ipecac levels in Gerald's blood. Here's the financial analysis showing how Mitchell planned to steal $1.8 million through fraudulent guardianship proceedings." Patricia's voice hardened. "And here's the recording where Mitchell admits his real motivation. That money could actually do some good in responsible hands. Damn right like mine." She let that sink in for a moment. "Yesterday, Bradford Mitchell was sentenced to 5 years in state prison for elder abuse, fraud, and attempted poisoning. He'll also pay $500,000 in restitution and will never be eligible for any inheritance from the Davis family." The room erupted in applause, but Patricia held up her hand. "But here's what Gerald Davis taught us about real justice. He could have had Mitchell destroyed completely. He could have pressed for attempted murder charges. He could have sued for everything Mitchell owned." Patricia smiled. "Instead, he showed mercy. He accepted a plea deal that ensures Mitchell gets help for his gambling addiction. Yes, that's what drove this scheme, and gives him a chance to rebuild his life after prison." I stood up slowly. The room quieted. "Martha always said that the point of consequences isn't to destroy someone. It's to teach them. Brad made terrible choices, but he's not irredeemable. He's young enough to learn from this and become better." I looked at Emma, who was crying quietly. "My daughter loved him once. That love wasn't wrong, even if Brad lost his way. The man she married had good qualities. Maybe prison will help him find those qualities again." Emma stood up and hugged me. "Dad, I'm so sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for, sweetheart. You trusted someone you loved. That's not a flaw. That's who Martha raised you to be." Dr. Johnson stood up from the audience. "There's one more thing everyone should know. Gerald could have let Brad's plan succeed. He could have taken the easy path, signed the papers, moved to assisted living, let someone else handle his problems." Sam's voice carried across the room. "Instead, he chose to fight. At 67 years old, he chose to gather evidence, build a case, and protect not just himself, but everyone Brad might have targeted next. Detective Brown nodded. We found evidence that Gerald wasn't Brad's first victim. Two other elderly clients had signed over property to Brad under suspicious circumstances. Gerald's case gave us the leverage to investigate those situations too. Two families got their inheritances back because Gerald Davis refused to be a victim, Lisa added. Mayor Rebecca Davis, Rebecca Martinez from my old AP government class, stood up. Which brings us to the real purpose of today's gathering. Rebecca walked to the front of the room carrying an official proclamation. By order of the City Council, we're announcing the establishment of the Martha and Gerald Davis Community Center for Senior Services. This facility will provide legal advocacy, financial counseling, and elder abuse prevention services to protect vulnerable seniors throughout our county. The room erupted in cheers and applause. The funding comes from community donations, a federal grant, and a substantial contribution from Gerald Davis himself. I smiled. Martha always said our money should help people. This seems like what she would have wanted. Rebecca continued reading. Furthermore, we're renaming this facility the Gerald Davis Education Center in recognition of his 40 years of service to our community's children and his recent demonstration that learning never stops. The standing ovation lasted 5 full minutes. As people began to mingle and share stories about Martha, I found myself surrounded by former students, colleagues, and friends. But the conversation that mattered most was with Emma. Dad, I need to ask you something. Of course. When did you know? When did you realize what Brad was doing? I thought about it carefully. I suspected after Miguel's warning. I knew for certain after our confrontation at the cafe when he called me old man and said the house was wasted on me. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because you loved him, and because I needed proof, not just suspicions. Most importantly, because I wanted you to see who he really was, not just take my word for it. Emma nodded slowly. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Don't be. You saved me from a life with someone who could poison his own family for money. You saved me from becoming a person who would stand by and watch that happen. She hugged me again. I'm proud to be your daughter, Dad. And I'm proud that when someone tried to take advantage of your grief, you turned it into a lesson about justice. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, I stood in the center of the room that now bore my name, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Brad had tried to erase Gerald Davis from existence. Instead, he had reminded everyone why Gerald Davis mattered. The aftermath unfolded exactly as you'd expect when someone tries to poison a beloved community figure. Brad's arrest made front-page news in the Metro Herald. Local real estate broker sentenced for poisoning father-in-law. The article included his mugshot, details of the scheme, and a quote from District Attorney Michelle Turner, another former student, class of '91, calling it one of the most calculated cases of elder abuse we've ever prosecuted. Brad's real estate license was permanently revoked. His brokerage firm, Mitchell Properties, dissolved within 2 weeks, as clients fled and partners distanced themselves. The office space he had leased on Harbor Street went vacant, with a for rent sign that stayed up for months, but the professional consequences were just the beginning. Emma filed for divorce exactly 72 hours after Brad's sentencing. I'd offered to pay for her legal fees, but Judge Williams handled the case pro bono as a personal favor. The proceedings were swift and decisive. Brad got nothing. The prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on before their marriage ironically protected Emma's assets, when his criminal conviction voided any claim to spousal support. He wanted me to sign a prenup to protect his business, Emma told me over coffee at Corner Cafe, the same booth where Brad had tried to manipulate me. Turns out it protected me instead. The house Brad and Emma had shared was sold immediately. Emma moved back into her childhood bedroom temporarily while she looked for a new place. Having her home again felt like a gift I hadn't dared hope for. Brad's gambling debts, which we learned had motivated the entire scheme, remained unpaid. He'd borrowed $340,000 from various creditors to cover losses at Atlantic City casinos. With his income gone and his assets frozen, those debts followed him to prison. The ironic part, Detective Brown explained during one of her follow-up visits, is that your house money wouldn't have solved his problems anyway. Gambling addicts don't pay off debts. They make bigger bets trying to win everything back. The ripple effects extended beyond Brad's immediate circle. His scheme had been sophisticated enough to fool several other families. Our case gave investigators the tools they needed to examine Brad's other senior consulting clients. 3 additional victims came forward. Mrs. Eleanor Patterson, 74, had signed over her $400,000 condo to Brad 6 months earlier. The Kowalski family had transferred their father's assets to a protective trust managed by Brad just 2 weeks before our confrontation. Brad was building a portfolio of elderly marks, Detective Brown explained. He'd identify vulnerable seniors, gain their trust, create artificial crises, then position himself as the solution. Classic predator behavior. All 3 families recovered their assets. Mrs. Patterson got her condo back with damages. The Kowalskis sued successfully for emotional distress. Brad's restitution payments would continue for decades, even after his release from prison. The media attention brought unexpected benefits. The state attorney general's office used our case to push through new legislation requiring additional oversight for guardianship proceedings and financial power of attorney transfers involving seniors. The Gerald Davis Act, as reporters dubbed it, mandated waiting periods, independent medical evaluations, and court-appointed advocates for any senior citizen transferring assets worth more than $100,000. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence was what happened to Brad's social media presence. Before his arrest, Brad had maintained an active Instagram account showcasing his luxury lifestyle, expensive cars, fancy dinners, vacation photos with captions like "living the dream" and "hard work pays off." He'd used the account to attract new clients and project success. After the news broke, that account became a monument to public humiliation. Every post was flooded with comments from community members who knew the truth. The vacation photos now carried responses like, "Hope prison food tastes better than that $200 steak," and "Looks like the only vacation you'll be taking now is to the state penitentiary." His former colleagues in real estate actively distanced themselves. The Harbor County Real Estate Association issued a statement condemning his actions and announcing new ethics training requirements for all members. Bradford Mitchell's actions violate every principle of trust and integrity our profession is built on, the statement read. We are committed to ensuring nothing like this ever happens again. Even his gym membership was revoked. The country club where he'd networked with wealthy potential victims asked him to resign. His favorite restaurant quietly made it clear he wasn't welcome anymore. But the consequence that seemed to affect him most was the complete social isolation. Emma had been his connection to respectability in our community. Through her, he'd met teachers, city workers, small business owners, people who formed the backbone of local society. After his arrest, that entire social network evaporated. His prison letters to Emma are pathetic, she told me one evening. He keeps asking about people from our social circle, wanting to know if anyone has asked about him. He can't accept that nobody wants anything to do with him anymore. Emma had shown me one letter, with Brad's permission conveyed through his attorney. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. "Emma, I know I can't undo what I did, but please tell me if any of our friends have mentioned me. Does anyone understand that I was sick? That the gambling made me do things I never would have done normally? I'm getting help here, real help, when I get out. Do you think people might give me a second chance?" Emma hadn't responded to any of his letters. The gambling was real, she told me. The addiction was real. But what he did to you, Dad, that was calculated. That was deliberate. That was who he chose to be. The final consequence was perhaps the most permanent. The complete destruction of Brad's reputation in the only community he'd ever known. In a small city like ours, reputation is everything. Brad would be eligible for parole in 3 years, but he'd never be able to rebuild his life here. Too many people knew the story. Too many families had been affected. He'll have to start over somewhere else, Detective Brown observed. New city, new name if he can manage it legally, but even then, a simple Google search will bring up the news articles. As I watched these consequences unfold, I felt something I hadn't expected. Pity. Brad had destroyed his own life as thoroughly as he'd tried to destroy mine. The difference was, I had people who loved me enough to fight back. He had no one left at all. 6 months later, I was sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading the morning paper when Emma knocked on the door. "Dad, are you busy?" "Never too busy for you, sweetheart. Coffee?" She poured herself a cup and sat down at the kitchen table where Martha used to plan her community meetings. For a moment, I could see both women clearly. Emma at 29, growing into the same kind of strength Martha had possessed, and Martha, in my memory, forever organizing some project to help others. I need to tell you something," Emma said. "I got a letter yesterday from Brad." I set down my newspaper. "What did he say?" "He wants me to visit him. He says he's been clean from gambling for 8 months now, that he's found religion, that he understands what he did wrong." Emma's voice was steady, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. "He wants to apologize to both of us in person." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. Part of me thinks I should hear him out. He was my husband. We had a good times before the gambling got bad. Maybe people can change." I nodded slowly. "They can. The question is whether you owe him the chance to prove it." Emma looked surprised. "You think I should visit him?" "I think you should do whatever feels right to you. But first, let me tell you what I've learned about boundaries." I refilled our coffee cups and settled back in my chair. For 2 years after your mother died, I had no boundaries. I was so deep in grief that I let anyone do anything. I didn't protect myself, didn't advocate for myself, didn't even trust my own perceptions when something felt wrong. Brad took advantage of that. He did. But here's what I realized. Boundaries aren't walls. They're not about shutting people out or punishing them. They're about protecting your ability to love without being destroyed. Emma was listening intently. Your mother had the strongest boundaries of anyone I've ever known. She could help a struggling family for months, but if they started taking advantage of her kindness, she'd step back. She could love someone deeply while still protecting herself from their problems. How do I know the difference? Trust your instincts. When Brad was poisoning me, part of me knew something was wrong. I could feel it, but I ignored those feelings because I thought being forgiving meant accepting everything. I reached across the table and took Emma's hand. If you visit Brad, go because you want to, not because you feel obligated. If you decide not to visit him, that's not cruelty, that's self-protection. You don't owe anyone access to your life, no matter what they used to mean to you. Emma was quiet for a long moment. What would Mom do? Your mother would probably visit him once. She'd listen to what he had to say. She'd tell him she forgave him, if that felt true, and then she'd leave and never look back. She wouldn't try to help him rebuild his life? Not at the cost of her own peace, and not at the cost of yours. Emma nodded slowly. I think I want to write him a letter instead. Tell him I forgive him, wish him well, but make it clear that forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. That sounds like something your mother would do. We sat quietly for a moment, drinking our coffee and watching the morning light filter through Martha's kitchen curtains. Dad, can I ask you something else? Always. Are you lonely, living here by yourself, I mean? Do you ever think about dating again or moving somewhere with more people around? I smiled. Honey, I have more people in my life now than I've had in years. My phone rings constantly with former students checking in. I volunteer at the community center twice a week. Judge Williams has me consulting on elder abuse cases. But romantically, maybe someday, but not because I'm lonely. If it happens, it'll be because I meet someone who adds joy to a life that's already full. Emma hugged me. I'm proud of you, Dad, for fighting back, for building something good out of something terrible, for teaching me about boundaries. The best teachers learn from their students, I said. You've taught me plenty about strength this year. As Emma left for work, I sat in my kitchen surrounded by 41 years of memories and felt something Martha would have understood perfectly. I felt grateful, not just for surviving Brad's scheme, not just for the network of people who'd protected me, but for learning the difference between being kind and being foolish. The lesson was simple. You can love people without giving them the power to destroy you. Some lessons are worth learning, even at 67, especially at 67. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What's the most important lesson a teacher ever taught you? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself when life gets complicated.